I'll send it over when I'm done.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, so next we have Jacie, and I'm super pumped to hear everything you have to say too. So welcome, and yeah, why don't you tell us your journey?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I guess for myself, I was diagnosed with a number of different autoimmune disorders when I was young, like a year and a half old. And so my whole childhood was in and out of hospitals, a lot of chronic pain, a lot of medication, a lot of inconsistency and stress and all of that kind of stuff. So not having, the knowledge that I do now around how your nervous system reacts when it's overstimulated. And my parents absolutely did the best that they could, but they didn't have that knowledge either, and how to support a child going through that. So it was just a whole lot of people doing the best they could with what they knew.
Exactly.
And eventually that snowballed. So I developed a pretty severe eating disorder when I was about 10. I was bulimic for 7 or 8 years. I replaced that addiction with drugs and alcohol in my late teens, early 20s. And then that spun into like sex addiction and all of this kind of stuff, right? So I went through, I would say, about 12 years of really intense struggle with mental health, addiction, behavioral and substance addiction, and just like pain and suffering and physical discomfort and pain and trying to avoid it and all of these things that felt so big that I didn't see any way to like create calmness or tranquility or long lasting joy in my life. I was in kind of into the energy work and stuff like that from a young age as well, but it was just overwhelmed by all of the others. So now I run a holistic freedom coaching business. And essentially what I do is I work with people who are stuck in that space of, it doesn't have to be necessarily as dramatic as my story, but stuck in that space of, I'm overwhelmed, I'm scared, I'm anxious all the time, I'm depressed all the time, I can't get out of my head, everything feels like it's too much, and they're just exhausted. And they kind of, like most people that I work with, when they show up, they're like, I want to give up. I can't keep doing this. Like they've really hit that wall of like, there has to be more to life than this chaos that I currently know. And the reason that I am so passionate about that is because I know the difference. I know that it's completely possible to go from really intense despair and pain and fear into like genuinely on the deepest level loving yourself. And I don't mean that in like a flighty way. I mean that in like I can look at someone and I can tell them without any fear, I love you, or I can tell them without any fear, go fuck yourself. Like you got to be able to say both, you know what I mean? And that comes down to, at the end of the day, self-knowledge. And that's what I am really focused on, like providing people. So I have a master's degree in counseling. I'm a Reiki master teacher and healer. I am a reflexologist, and I have a diploma in business management as well as a bachelor of philosophy and leadership. So I am all over the place with my credentials, but it all really comes together to the same, like the fact is we have to look at ourselves holistically. So it's one thing for us to try and change the way that we think about something, but that doesn't do us any good if we're not also understanding why our nervous system is overwhelmed and healing that from the inside out. And it's great to do deep breathing and do things to calm your body, but that's not helpful if you don't understand why you have invasive and like detrimental thought patterns. Right. So it's really coming at it from all angles. And I am very focused as well, like on energy work and spirituality, and bringing like a sense of faith and trust into that healing process as well. And by like faith can be anything. If you are like, it could be God, It could be Buddha. It could be, I'm a big fan of instilling faith in ourselves, right? Like, look at everything you've gone through and gotten through and come out of. You can get through whatever this is too, right? So it's kind of combining that, that earthy, I can do this, and tapping into a little bit more self-knowledge about like, why am I reacting this way? Why is my body reacting this way? Why is my mind going into this spin? And then also integrating some energy work to get rid of the energy that doesn't belong to you. So many people have thought patterns and belief systems that they picked up when they were 5 years old by the adults in their life who were already traumatized, right? And then we carry out these cycles throughout our life. So I kind of went off of how I got where I am and more into what I'm doing. But basically, to me, like, freedom is a state of being, the same way that anxiety or depression or overwhelm are states of being. So if we can understand what brought us to the place of overwhelm or anxiety or depression and start to backpedal and heal it in that holistic way, where you're working with your body physically, healing the nervous system, like, again, feeding the body what it needs, getting enough sleep, like all of these really basic things teach your nervous system that it can trust you. And so that's a really important aspect of healing, is focusing on the body. And then going into the mind, and like, we all have these different parts. So as a therapist, one thing that I do a lot of work with is parts therapy, or internal family systems is another term for that. And basically it's identifying, like, we've all experienced, we feel crazy because there's these voices fighting in our head. And it's like, I really want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym, but I really want to stay in bed. And rather than allowing those voices to fight, it's actually about taking a step back, giving space to both of them so they can both really be heard, and then integrating it so that rather than having all of these parts fighting with each other, you're like an integrated person within yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love it.
Okay.
So can you give us an example of how you would step back and let them have their space?
Absolutely. So basically, it's really helpful to name them. So there's often a part of us that wants to really be outgoing and, maybe meet new people or put ourselves out there, especially as business women. And then there's going to be the part that's like, oh, but what if they don't like me? What if no one buys my product? What if I get judged? What if I get criticized? What if I get rejected, right? That fear comes in. So we have the part that's motivated and excited, and the part that's really fearful. The motivated part usually gets pissed off at the fearful part. That's often what happens. So the very first thing that you do is notice, when you're working with this fear, how do you feel towards it? Are you angry at it? Are you resentful towards it? Are you tired of it? And just notice, okay, I feel really angry towards that fear, which means I'm not loving myself fully. I'm judging and rejecting this part of myself. And then you ask that, say it's anger and resentment. You ask that anger, like, hey, I really need to talk to fear right now. So you don't have to go away forever, but can you step to the side just for a minute and let me have a conversation with this really scared part of myself? And more often than not, the anger will be like, yeah, okay, as long as I'm allowed to come back in a few minutes, I'll leave you alone for now. And then you say to the fear, like, there's a few specific questions, but really what the idea is to be like, hey, I'm here to listen to whatever you have to say without judging. I'm holding space. It doesn't mean you're going to believe everything the fear is telling you, but you're like really listening and digging deep into why is it there? What is it afraid of? And often what comes up is a surface level answer. Like, hey, why are you here? Well, I'm afraid that we won't do well. But you can't leave it at just that, right? It's okay. Well, what will happen if we don't do well? Well, we won't have enough money. All right. And what are you afraid will happen if we don't have enough money? And you continue that line of inquiry until you hit the nail on the head. And honestly, you'll just know when you get there. There will be this emotional resonance when you get to the root of the problem. And when you do, it's like, okay, thank you so much for being brave enough to share that. I see that and I honor it. And what can I do to help you feel more safe? This can be really difficult to do by yourself if you haven't practiced kind of connecting to different parts of yourself. And a really helpful way to do that is notice somatically in your body somatically just means like your physical experience in something, for those who don't know. So physically in your body, where do you feel this emotion and what does it feel like? So for me, fear often comes kind of right in here, just under my throat, in between my throat and my heart. And it's like a tight ball, and it almost has like a blackish kind of color to it. So that would be, I would focus in on that physical sensation and whatever else I kind of interpret with it. And as I focus on that, I ask that part that I'm seeing or feeling those questions and kind of let it come from the part, and resist letting the mind get too involved, because the mind creates stories and judgments. And the mind will kind of further reject those irrational thoughts. We're all just little kids who haven't healed yet. So we need, like, if a 5-year-old came to you and was like, I'm really scared, more often than not, that 5-year-old kind of gets an attempt at support, but it's something along the lines of, you don't need to be scared. You're going to be fine. Don't worry. So there isn't really, we're never really taught how to engage with our emotions in a way that moves us through them. We're taught how to engage with them in a way that we ignore, either harshly or gently ignore them. And what happens is the energy of those emotions builds up. And this is where trauma kicks in. So when I say trauma, I think it's really important to identify that I don't necessarily mean like some super easily identified massive traumatic event in your life. Trauma is anything that exceeds the nervous system's ability to cope. So that could be at 4 years old, mom had a new baby and you felt completely abandoned and isolated. Your adult self logically is fully aware that your mother did not abandon you, but that ingrained, that emotional energy and those thought patterns and those neurons that started firing together at 4 that said, I've been abandoned, I'm not important anymore. If those neurons aren't retrained, they stay there in that same pattern and they keep firing that way. And so it's digging in and saying, okay, wow, this part of me that's afraid of being rejected if I put myself out there for business kind of feels like it's 4 years old. Like, why would that even happen? And it's not even necessarily about understanding why, but it's about going in and like giving space to that 4-year-old or whatever age it may be. And what that does, again, similarly to feeding your body and resting your body and moving your body, which, like I mentioned earlier, helps the nervous system learn to trust you. When you go in and you really uncover and excavate these younger emotions or these parts that have been exiled or abandoned, opening space for them to be accepted and embraced creates trust in the nervous system. So your nervous system is not reacting with anxiety every time you perceive a rejection, because there's a sense of self-trust. So really tapping into that self-trust and holding yourself without judgment. It's not about fixing. We're human. We're supposed to have all of these emotions. We're not, to get rid of the emotions would really be getting rid of our human experience. But it's about learning to see the emotions, feel the emotions, accept the emotions, and not necessarily believe them in a way that gets you into a whirlwind of anxious thought along with it. So.
I love that. And it's funny because I've identified that long enough ago that when my kids are upset, I always try to, well, why do you feel that way? And then ask all the questions. And whether you're a kid or not, like sometimes you just don't understand. You don't understand yourself why you feel like that. So what would be your suggestion or your advice on like how to actually find it? Especially if you don't really know how to listen to those voices.
Right. Like I said, it can be really difficult if you don't have like a guide. One of the biggest things I recommend is finding a counselor or a coach that you click well with, because having a professional, our nervous systems speak to each other the same way that our energy speaks to each other. So if you're in the room with someone who's been doing this work and who has a really calm, centered nervous system because they've dug in deep, they're going to be able to hold a calm and open space. So then your nervous system, as it gets activated, it's not going to be re-triggered by the person next to you.
Okay.
It's almost like putting a soothing balm over it just by being in the room with someone who's able to stay calm and centered. So finding someone to like actually help facilitate the process is really big. We have a bit of a societal view right now that we're supposed to be able to fix everything ourselves and not necessarily have to ask for help in the healing journey. And that's pretty detrimental, if you ask me. That's my personal opinion. Actually, it's my professional opinion. But and then another way is educate yourself. Research what trauma responses are. And that was something I had intended on going into and completely got off topic from. But we have our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses. Every single person has them. It's part of our nature. Some of us are living constantly in it. And some of us are oscillating between, rest and fight and flight. So do I have time to do a quick?
Oh, I would love to. And actually, our third speaker, she's having some issues. Her kids aren't feeling very well, so I don't know if she's going to be able to come. So feel free. I would absolutely love. But can you please repeat the 4 things? It's fight, flight, fear, and...
So fight, flight, and those are sympathetic nervous system responses. And basically what that means is that your body's getting highly activated, right? It's ready to, it's quite literally ready to fight something or run away. And then freeze, which is like it's called dorsal vagal shutdown. You don't really need to remember that. But freeze is when your body is so overwhelmed, it can't fight anymore. It can't run anymore. It shuts down. That's depression.
Okay. And what part of the nervous system is that?
That would be more of the dorsal vagal nerve is like a major nerve that runs through our nervous system. So it's the vagus nerve is deactivating.
Okay.
And then the 4th response that I mentioned there is fawn. So that's not so much a nervous system response. It's more of a behavioral coping mechanism. So fawning is like people pleasing, avoiding conflict, abandoning yourself in favor of other people, taking care of everyone else before yourself, inability or difficulty setting boundaries, not being able to say no. It's more of an ingrained behavioral response of like, if I keep taking care of everyone else, they have to love me back. Basically. I don't sugarcoat things very much, by the way.
We don't want you to.
So with fight, that is responses like when you catch yourself getting angry, irritable, wanting to like hurt someone or yourself. So self-harm is a fight response. It's the nervous system being like, we're not safe at the end of the day. We can tap out with this fight response. Flight is anxiety and fear, panic, avoidance, chronically worrying. So ruminating over and over again in your head, always replaying scenarios that have already happened or rehearsing 1,000 different ways a future scenario could play out so that you're prepared for every avenue. A lot of people don't even realize that's what they're doing until they hear me say that, and then they realize that's what they're doing. So that perfectionism is a bit of a fawning, but it's also a bit of a flight behavior. It's essentially trying to remove yourself from any potential discomfort. So fight and flight are heightened responses, and our body is using a lot of resources when it's in fight or flight. So what happens is our nutrients, our oxygen, blood flow, it's all being sent to the extremities. It's being pulled away from the digestive system. So we're actually losing energy because we're not able to digest food properly. Over time, it depletes the immune system. as well. So that's why people get sick when they're chronically stressed out. It also affects the reproductive system. So a lot of women who have reproductive issues, that's connected to chronic stress, because these are considered the non-essential organ systems by the body when you're in immediate danger. And when you're in immediate danger, they are non-essential. Reproduction and digestion are not required when you're fighting a tiger. However, when you can't get out of your own head and you're constantly putting yourself into fight or flight, then you're constantly draining these organ systems, which are actually pretty important. So getting yourself out of fight or flight is kind of an important key aspect to creating a healthy nervous system. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on really quickly, I have a sheet or a PDF, I guess, that I could send Robin, maybe if you wanted to post it afterwards. But it's the vagal nerve polyvagal theory. And what that talks about is the way we move through fight or flight. So fight or flight is kind of, if you have like I wish I could share my screen.
How can I allow you to do that?
We're already recording, so we can't switch hosts, but that's okay. I'll send it to you. But basically what happens is we go into fight or flight. We use all of those resources that I just talked about. And eventually, if we're not willing or able to change our environment or our thought patterns or our reactions, our body runs out of resources. So at the very peak here is where it goes into freeze. So when you're in freeze, that's more of like depression, apathy, hopelessness, really shutting down. And your body is actually shutting down as a way of trying to save resources and actually support itself. So as much as it feels really uncomfortable and counterproductive, it's one of the ways that the body is protecting itself from further harm. Now, when you're at the top of that curve, to come back down into a place of like calm, or it's called social engagement in this particular case, you have to go back through fight or flight. You have to come back down into an activated nervous system until you can reach this place of calmness. And this is what a lot of people aren't aware of. And so they don't understand why they're constantly flipping back and forth between anxiety and depression, or between heightened responses and no responses, because they don't understand that they have to stay in and engage with the discomfort of the fight or flight response before they can actually get to a space of calm, kind of tranquil engagement. And just having that piece of knowledge for a lot of people is really empowering and helpful, because they can like engage with it, they can work with it, they know what their body is doing.
And that's when it comes back to like seeking out education and not
right. So educate yourself on these responses and start to learn about how that's impacting your body, how it's impacting your life, understanding that it's okay to admit that you had traumatic experiences, even if it didn't look like, you know, physical abuse as a child or a massive car accident that injured you severely. Like, yes, those are big traumatic experiences, but every single person's nervous system has been traumatized in some way, and that's okay. It's not about comparing our experience to other people's experience. It's about coming back inwards and understanding, what does my body need in order for me to feel safe?
Oh my goodness. I'm